Our top story. Taiwanese chip-making giant TSMC is building a second U.S. facility in the southwest state of Arizona, highlighting the Biden administration's push to bring more of the semiconductor supply chain to the United States. But are there enough trained workers there to meet the demand? Voice of America's Quinn has a story for us from Arizona, where they are currently ramping up training for workers and students at all levels. Take a look.
President Biden's visit to Arizona computer chip facilities this week underscores the Grand Canyon state's position in the emerging U.S. semiconductor ecosystem. With TSMC, the Taiwanese chip giant, building north of downtown Phoenix, Intel expanding southeast of the city, and suppliers from around the world moving in, the region is already creating thousands of new jobs. Some of those new TSMC employees are being recruited at U.S. universities and trained in Taiwan. Here at Mesa Community College, students at a semiconductor technician boot camp are this day learning about tools and completing a work order.
I've always been a bit of a tech geek, so I saw the opening and I was like, that sounds like something interesting I would enjoy doing. So I'm just exploring it.
The program has graduated more than 300 students since June, attracting some people who might not have seen themselves in manufacturing.
It's new work, it's exciting work, it's building work. It means that they're having an opportunity to make a difference.
Tennessee Jackson joined the program after working in call centers. She just got hired at Intel as a semiconductor technician.
What inspires me is technology, knowing that every single person needs it.
Meeting the workforce demands of Arizona's burgeoning semiconductor sector includes a 3,700 square meter clean room at nearby Arizona State University, where students, companies, and startups work on hardware innovations. It is part of Arizona's approach to attracting some of the $52 billion of semiconductor funding in the new federal CHIPS and Science Act.
CHIPS and Science Act is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This is the moment. This is the moment to build out capabilities, infrastructure, expertise. We're bringing this capability back into the U.S. You've got to have a workforce ready to engage it.
With 30,000 engineering students, Arizona State is the country's largest college of engineering and a driver in meeting next-generation demand.
And that takes a different mindset shift about how do you leverage technology? How do you teach in a way that you weren't taught? That is, you have different strategies for the way that you reach students, and how do you do that? That's a constant conversation here.
Mark Lee, a PhD student from Kazakhstan, doesn't know if he wants to work at the companies setting up shop near Arizona State, where he is studying. He's interested in finding new materials other than silicon for chips.
Want to solve problems and want to create technologies that will be commercialized and, very quickly, in just a couple of years.
It's that kind of know-how policymakers say the U.S. needs. Quinn, VOA News, Phoenix, Arizona.
And to discuss this further, joining us now is Voice of America's correspondent Jessica Stone. She's live with us on this special broadcast from the White House with more analysis. Jessica, thanks for joining us. Now, this announcement about new manufacturing and jobs comes as questions continue about whether the U.S. economy is heading back into recession in the new year. Given that the Federal Reserve has one more meeting before the year's end, what can we expect?
Well, that meeting is going to take place next Wednesday afternoon, and the markets are currently predicting that the Federal Reserve is going to raise rates by half a point, not 3/4 of a percentage point, which has been their pattern thus far. And so far, this hot jobs market in the United States is really protecting the public from feeling the full implications of the inflation. But that inflation still remains close to 7 or 8%, which is obviously much higher than the 2% mandate that the Federal Reserve tries to keep inflation at. And numerous polls are saying that, look, Americans are feeling the pinch, especially around the holidays. In fact, the Consumer Confidence Board late last month said that inflation expectations from consumers are at their highest since they were in July, meaning they're not looking to purchase homes, cars, or big appliances. That said, we are seeing just in the last couple of days gas prices go down. That is a clear mood lifter for most Americans, since everybody needs gas in their cars and it affects the price of food. So we may begin to see the emotional impact of inflation ease a little bit going into the very end of the year.
Right, Jessica, this announcement about new manufacturing and jobs comes as questions continue about whether the economy is heading back into a recession. And of course, you've just answered that question for us. But what lies ahead when it comes to recession? Will we see a dip in that going into the new year?
Well, we've had a lot of layoffs just in the last couple of months, and that's certainly raising eyebrows because it feels like a lot of people are losing their jobs. We've had mass layoffs at Meta, at Amazon, at CNN, and now at PepsiCo. And it makes sense that we would see those layoffs in the tech sector, right? Because those are the companies that benefited from the pandemic. They grew exponentially through the pandemic. They hired a lot, but now they're easing off of that hiring because they're easing off of some of that demand. PepsiCo, though, said in October that it's going to lay off a number of its white-collar workers in the United States, and that follows a different pattern that we're also seeing in the U.S. economy. Walmart, Ford Motor Company, they're also doing the same thing, keeping their frontline employees, laying off their back office white-collar workers. And going into this week, jobless claims were about 4,000 above where they were the previous week. We watch them week by week, and currently at this hour it's 9:06 Eastern. We are still waiting for the jobless claims to be released from the U.S. Labor Department. That will give us an indication of which way it's going. But of course, we expect to see higher numbers given the layoffs announced just this past few days.
Right, Jessica, thanks for those updates. Stay with us on this broadcast. We'll come back to you for more. Now, with two of the country's oldest presidents poised to compete for the office in 2024, Americans are increasingly asking how old is too old to lead a nation where the average resident is in their 30s. VOA's Anita Powell reports from the White House. Take a look at this next report.
In politics, age is much more than a number. It's a talking point. Consider President Joe Biden's recent response to a question about his fitness for office.
I feel great. Nothing's changed. We're in good shape. And so, I'm looking forward to celebrating my 58th birthday.
Jokes aside, Biden is 80. That makes him one of the world's oldest democratically elected leaders. His biggest rival, former President Donald Trump, is 76. And until next month, the third-ranking elected post is held by 82-year-old Nancy Pelosi. She recently announced she will step down from her role as House Speaker.
I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hour's come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility.
Historians say age has long been used as a cudgel in high-level American politics, a weapon wielded by all sides to question whether opponents can meet the challenges of a demanding job. The bigger issue, experts say, is the effect older leaders have on political continuity.
The problem with leaders who hang on so long is they tend not to nurture effective, middle-aged successors. Because if those successors were there and powerful and in power, they would replace those who came before them. So we're going to see a jump from those who are in their 70s to those who are in their 40s in many of our parties.
Some of these older candidates say they're still in top shape. Supporters of Donald Trump say that he's fit to run, and it's Biden who is frail. Both claims are highly subjective.
You need the wisdom of someone who's been around the block several times. And so while you need the physical youth that Donald Trump has, you also need the wisdom which Donald Trump also has.
Trump maintains that age is a construct, explaining there are many people in their 80s and even 90s that are as good and sharp as ever. Biden is not one of them, but it has little to do with his age. In actuality, life begins at 80. In actuality, the average American lives to just over 76 years, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says. And Suri says the wide age gap between voters and leaders raises problems.
One of the challenges that Biden has is because he is so much older than the median Democratic voter, he sometimes has trouble generating excitement. We did see more young people vote in this midterm election, but it doesn't appear that they were voting as great accolades of Joe Biden.
A truism of the American presidency, it ages you fast. Consider this 47-year-old, or this 46-year-old. And here they are, after 8 years in one of the toughest jobs in the world, the U.S. presidency. Anita Powell, VOA News, the White House.
VOA's Jessica Stone is still with us from Washington. Jessica, speaking of presidential politics, we are still waiting to learn whether the Congressional Committee investigating the January 6 assault on the Capitol will recommend criminal charges against former President Donald Trump. What's the state of play in Washington on this?
Well, the chairman of the committee said this week that the committee is going to file some criminal referrals out of their investigation, and those will, of course, go to the Department of Justice, who then has to decide whether to prosecute them. But that does indicate that they believe they have enough evidence to press criminal charges against certain individuals. And members of the committee have said, look, we're focusing specifically on people who assaulted the Capitol that day and people also who were at the center of the events and those who masterminded the assault on the Capitol that day. Of course, the key question for all of us, right, is will that include Donald Trump? We don't have any names currently. Anything else is just speculation. But we do know that the case the Justice Department has against former President Donald Trump is moving forward because the special counsel leading that investigation has requested phone records from a number of people that President Trump spoke to during the election count of 2020, including election officials from Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And we've also learned in a separate investigation that those classified documents that President Trump was found with during that raid earlier this year on Mar-a-Lago, there have been additional documents located that were classified, and so that also is painting a picture of culpability on the part of the former president.
Right, Jessica, this week also marked the end of the midterm elections in the U.S. Voters in Georgia re-elected Senator Raphael Warnock, giving the Democrats a two-seat majority in the Senate. What does that mean for governing in the new year?
Well, it certainly should be easier for Democrats to govern in the new year. They will be able to pass legislation when members are out sick or traveling. Vice President Kamala Harris isn't going to have to travel from the White House here all the way down Pennsylvania Avenue to Capitol Hill or have to be in town to break a tie. And it also means that Democratic moderates, such as West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, won't have quite the power that they have had to dictate legislation. You might remember that in the battle here in Washington over how to pass the Inflation Reduction Act, he was really the key vote that everyone was seeking. And in the process of seeking that, of course, he can ask for what his state needs. And so members like him are going to get slightly less power. This two-vote majority also gives Democrats more power on committees, and that's going to have an impact on what kinds of judicial nominees are passed. And so that means Biden's picks for judges and picks for political nominees inside his administration will go a little bit more smoothly. So at the same time, the House Democrats on the House side are going to have a lot more investigations into the administration. So there'll be a push-pull, but certainly the Democrats in the Senate will have a much clearer path to produce results on that side of the Capitol.
Jessica Stone, our correspondent from Washington, thank you so much for the latest inputs and thanks for joining us on the broadcast.